Ever since I played Oddworld Soulstorm, I've had this theory that the Fleeches were meant to be in the game but were potentially cut sometime during development. Specifically, I think they were meant to be the primary enemy in the 4th level in the game, the Funicular. There are multiple reasons I have this theory, but perhaps the biggest one is the fact that they're literally name dropped in the level itself. When playing it for the first time, when I heard this Mudokon say this,
"Last night, some tried to hide deeper in the mine shafts, but it wasn't long before we heard horrible screams and the screeches of Fleeches. Then it was silence, and none that went in came out."
I thought we were going to go into the cave, the mine shaft, and find Fleeches. The Mudokon literally says he heard Fleeches in the cave. The word Fleeches is even capitalised in the subtitles, which I know is to emphasise the emotion and his fear of them, but it also potentially suggests that they're really important or something, like as though to say, take notice of this, prepare for them, or something like that. And he talks about Mudokons going in there and not coming out. Everything suggested they were going to be in the cave and that we were about to encounter them as an enemy. And then you go in there and the music plays, and my instant reaction to the music was, that sounds like the Fleech music from Exoddus, or what I call the Fleech music anyway. This music in Soulstorm, which by the way plays whenever you go into any cave in the entire game I believe, has the same or a very similar sounding eerie rising note as used in Exoddus. And already when you enter the cave, you can see the Zeds of sleeping creatures. Just like the Fleeches when you first see them in Exoddus, so I was like, oh boy. And then you go deeper into the cave and see that it's Slogs. So anyway, you've gone into the cave because the Mudokon fella tells you that Fleech guano, which I'd never heard that word before, but it's excrement according to Google, which means it also happens to be the Slug's favourite dish. Apparently this Fleech guano helps symptoms of Soulstorm brew addiction.
Fleeches are terrifying things, but their droppings have cured many ills. Some Fleech guano might help us, though. But who would be brave enough to find some?
According to this Mudokon anyway, though personally I think it's a bit weird that this guy was just eating Fleech waste from the floor. Not generally the first thing someone would think of for a hangover cure, but there you go. Actually I had a quick look just out of curiosity and I didn't find anything to suggest guano in real life has medicinal qualities or has ever been thought to. In fact, it actually causes diseases. So I don't know what this chump was thinking, just being like, oh I feel sick, I'm gonna eat this crap and maybe it'll make me feel better. Actually, I just realised he doesn't actually say that he ate it, so never mind that then. I'm thinking of the paramold guy. But it's still weird that he's dying and that's what he's asking for, if you ask me. So anyway, following this guy's instructions, you're looking for Fleech guano, so you go into the caves and you collect Sleech guano, which just seems really weird. Like, why say Fleech guano when you end up looking for Sleech guano? And there's no reference to this, as far as I recall, to the fact that the Mudokon says Fleech guano and you end up picking up Sleech guano, and apparently that works just as fine. It feels like in this cave was meant to be Fleeches and Fleech guano, but then they changed it to Slogs and Sleech guano and didn't re-record a line or something. Now Lorne said on Discord in 2019, I've mentioned this before, that Fleeches would be in Soulstorm but they'd be in their next stage of life, on from their larvae Fleech state, which presumably are what the Sleeches are. Though likewise I don't think this is ever explicitly said in the game, but just can be guessed by the extremely similar names, and plus, you know, the fact that Sleech guano apparently has the same healing effects as Fleech guano. And another thing that suggests that Fleeches were meant to be in the game are that Lorne did literally say, I guess we're committed to Fleeches now, though I've taken that to mean in their Sleech form. So back to the Slogs, I feel like it's kind of unusual to have Slogs on their own, just guarding deep within the caves of an abandoned mine, with no Sligs nearby. Did the Sligs just leave him there and abandon the Slogs? Maybe. It's known that the Sligs aren't exactly the kindest masters to their pets, but it still seems a bit out of place to me. And when I first played it, it confused me probably way more than it should have, because I was going into the cave expecting Fleeches, finding Slogs, and picking up Sleech guano, which was the first mention of Sleeches. So in the dark cave, the Slogs looked a bit different to me. Their collar spike section just looks slightly longer than I'm used to with Slogs, and as a result I assumed that because they were surrounded by Sleech guano, that these Slogs were what Sleeches were, because I didn't know anything about Sleeches at the time. And for some reason I thought they were like some alternate cave-dwelling Slog variant, much like how Slegs are a variant in Stranger's Wrath. Considering the Funicular was meant to be sort of a more Stranger's Wrath inspired location, it didn't seem far off to me that they'd have their own Slog variants, and I assumed these were what Fleeches were, even though it's pretty obvious by the name that they're supposed to be something to do with Fleeches. But even so, the Fleeches just seem to fit that location better, I think, because it's meant to be like an abandoned mining facility, and Fleeches seem like a more appropriate enemy to have infesting the caves of an abandoned area, I think. That's just my personal opinion. The Funicular just sort of seems like the perfect place and the perfect level to have Fleeches in, and also just saying the Fleeches of the Funicular sounds really good. Now it's also interesting to note that the Funicular is one of the only levels in the entire game not to have Sligs. If I recall correctly, I think the only other one is the Fleech level midway through the game. So it's interesting that the only industrial influence in the level are Slogs. It seems quite random, and it just feels like Fleeches were in this level and then just erased and are replaced with an enemy they already had working, relatively late in the development or something potentially. I could be completely wrong, of course. This is purely just a theory I've had since playing the game, but maybe they were never intended to be in there. It's simply a curious thought that I had. This isn't a criticism either, it's just something I found fascinating. I thought it'd be interesting to theorise about some of this stuff that I personally found odd in this level. So who knows what the true answers are? Were the Slogs abandoned by the Sligs in the caves? Where did the Fleeches that left the droppings go? Maybe chased out by the Slogs? And how deep into these mine shafts do you have to go to hear the screeches of the Fleeches of the Funicular?
Hello, follow me.